Have you seen more like structure or processes, like have things become more formalized in a way, kind of as steadily was experiencing that growth? Because that's one of the things that as I described kind of in my Onlia journey, was one of the things that really stood out to me, like the need for things to be more written down. And maybe the culture deck is one of those examples, right? Like with 5 people, you may not have needed a culture deck, but you currently have it. So like that formalization or processes, policies, is that something that you see at Steadily too?
I do. We originally had one of our values as context, not control.
Mm,
And that wording was, very intentionally chosen when we created our culture. And over time, that has modified itself to high context.
mm,
And it's not that there's controls in place across the organization, but there are certainly roles that require more process.
yeah,
We're operating a very highly regulated environment. We set high context, but at the end of the day, there are certain roles that need a bit more quality assurance and more process in order to be successful than others. Marketing and creative roles operate in a high context environment, but I think it's important that the culture that we set at a high level is reflective of all the different types of roles within the organization. So for that reason, now we operate with high context.
right, yeah. And you mentioned the client obsessed kind of as a value that you're considering to kind of implement across the whole organization, even though there are roles that might not have direct client contact.
Mm-hmm.
But you're looking for kind of values and culture identifiers that go across the whole organization. Right. Love it. Are there any, it sounds like an amazing place to work, to be honest. A very strong culture. And this is, Nora and I discussed about this too. Like, what is a strong culture? Is that it necessarily a good culture? I think in your scenario, it seems to be both. Like it's very intentionally designed. So strong in that way that it kind of survive or kind of lives across the various different departments. It survives if people leave. It's documented in this culture deck, but also strong in you really kind of only work with people who are truly excited about this culture.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the tenets of success is having a distributed culture.
Hmm.
Um, so the leadership team ultimately is, of course, the one that sets the culture, and especially when you're early on, they're the ones that are defining it. And then with every new hire that comes into the organization, it's also their job now to be a steward of that culture, to live it, to showcase it every day. There are certain elements of our culture that help with that, with instilling it, distributed across our organization more broadly. And one of those is instant and frequent feedback. So we
Hmm.
don't do a traditional review cycle at the end of the year. We're constantly learning, giving feedback, using every opportunity throughout the year as a chance to grow, and having rapid iterative cycles instead of having one long annual review
Yeah.
cycle. And so I think things like that really help you stay on top of the culture and live and breathe it every single day. And my CEO and founder would say that culture is one of those things that you have to constantly iterate and you have to
Hmm.
constantly remind people of, because they will forget it. They're busy, they're working, they've got, all these other priorities, and it's not necessarily the first thing that's top of mind. And so finding ways to keep it top of mind, to talk about it in the regular context of your work, to socialize it, and to make sure that everyone lives and breathes it, I think is really important to keeping it alive.
Are there any specific rituals or I don't know, like rituals or habits that you see across the organization that you're willing to share?
Yeah, we have probably some weirder ones that are things that we're trying to
Are they
actively
weirder
squish
than
out
what
of
we
our
did at
culture.
Onlia?
There were some weird ones there too. I think weirdness is actually a good part of culture. I think you should lean into the stuff that makes it weird. But one of the ones that we're actively trying to avoid are things like meetings. We'll go through our calendars, and any meeting that's become a standing meeting that you might not necessarily need, take it out of your calendar, free up some
Mm,
more time to create. Use that for heads down space. We're very thoughtful, intentional about communications and what channels we use for that. So Slack versus email, for example, we have
mm-hmm.
regular conversations about which ones make for the most useful and efficient time for what you need to communicate. We do all hands meetings as an organization, but as we've scaled, those have also changed in frequency and in scope and what we communicate. And now they're most often used to actually communicate culture elements or things that we might have discussed as a leadership team that need more broader visibility or context.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a constant work in motion to keep our culture the way it is. And there's definitely creep of bad habits that establish themselves on smaller teams across the organization. And so you periodically have to go in and just do a little review and raise the bar again.
Yeah. I like that. And I love how you said like weirdness could be a really good thing for culture. And I mean, I joked about Bonny and Lia, but it is actually something that I really loved what we did. Like every week we still had like, even when we were a 50-person team, we had this one team meeting that everyone always attended. And we started that with this big circle. And at every meeting, we started in this circle with some sort of an icebreaker or I mean, we did the hokey pokey more than once. There were, I don't know, there was another one where you had to walk up to your colleague and say like, smile if you love me or something. And it made people feel really, really uncomfortable. Also really great eye opener for me, how that kind of across the Dutch culture and Canadian culture had some very different nuances. And as weird as it might sound, I think the intention behind it and what it did was level the playing field. Like everyone was silly, everyone was weird, and that made for kind of equality and equity in these conversations. So that's still something that I do. When we meet up with former colleagues, we always kind of make fun about it, but I do think it was one of the really good and strong things in our culture. And created for or kind of made for that autonomy and freedom and kind of all feeling like a creator in that in those early days.
Yeah, I remember that circle.
Yeah,
it was fun. I totally miss things like that. It was super fun. Yeah.
What based on your both experiences now, kind of if you were to give any advice to leaders or founders in kind of hyper growth situations, what would you recommend or what's your best advice when it comes to building and maintaining a culture?
I think intention for your culture, I would try to be very intentional and very clear on the culture from the start. It's much easier to introduce nuance or evolve your values over time in small incremental ways than to try to set sail in an entirely new direction. And so the more that you can establish that culture from a very early starting point and keep it consistent over time, I think the more impactful it'll be. Do what works for you as a founding team or as a leadership team. I think emulating another culture might not lead to success, and identifying your own unique culture and what makes your organization unique and successful. I think that's critical to be true to who you are as a business. And I think it's okay to do things that are maybe a bit atypical. Like I've never done that circle group experience at any other organization, and I probably never will again. But that was unique to Bonny and Lia, and it was one of the things that made it, such a great workplace. So yeah, be a little bit weird, make it your own, and find others who want to join you in building something.